Vivian, do you mind going ahead with the recording? Thank you. So you'll see that pop up in front of you. And, we've really, I think the CPS Core conversation has become kind of the highlight of what our core group does. So in addition to providing the services that are expected, which is consultations and linking people together, what we've found is that providing these opportunities for multidisciplinary engagement, we thought would, number one, allow us to highlight the work that's ongoing within the CFAR, allow us to highlight the work of our DC health partners, our early stage investigators, our community partners, but then also to allow for opportunities for multidisciplinary thoughts and hopefully research proposals, applications that then get funded, that then result in innovative work. And so we've used the core conversation as a platform to allow us to present on different topics that can go all the way from very much process and implementation of research, the how-to of research, the how-to of applications. We have to be careful not to overlap with what the developmental core does, for example. So, when we do some of the tutorials, maybe on setting up a study team once you actually have an application. And Manya had done a really beautiful job putting something together. And, Sam, myself, Mark kind of talked a little bit about our experiences. So we kind of rounded it out. Things around statistical approaches, sample size, all of those are in our wheelhouse to do. But then, really thinking about what's happening in the city, the kinds of research that we think there's still room for development that, and in many ways that make use of existing resources or structures. So trying to really highlight the DC cohort or the MaxY study, those sorts of things. Those are all things that we've done before. And then so this is a summary of all of the different activities over this past calendar year. So it really shows nice variety, breadth, depth, and we look forward to doing that again this coming year. But those, just to highlight, so those really these have been the core products from our core that we will be writing about in the recompetition, but that we also think has direct implications for promoting science and research in in the DC metropolitan area. So maybe we can start by we had a few things we put together just to highlight and to stimulate discussion. I don't know if we have other people who've joined other than whom I saw earlier. This thing's moving. So are there gaps in clinical research that we should or could address in a CPS core conversation, cross-disciplinary topics that would be good for us to think about incorporating, collaborations or outcomes that have come about as a result of a previous seminar that we're not aware of, any topics that people would like to present or share in this venue. So I'll try to see if I can end this show. Well, I'd like for us to see each other better, I think. But this is taking up a lot of the space. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So maybe we can start with any kind of feedback on or reflections on this past year that would be for us to just be aware of, or things that maybe even Alan, things that you see as important as we start thinking about what we will include as strengths in recompetition and potentially start thinking about like future directions that we will be also including in that same section. And
Thank you, Sibley. I'm happy. I mean, I'm given the topic, this is sort of like early strategic planning in a sense. And I'm not surprised that given the topic, it's a smaller group today, but I have a number of thoughts. First of all, I've, as I've said all along, I really like these clinical conversations. It's a small city, and the fact that you've gotten 12 to 20 people, midweek, month after month for almost all of these sessions, I think is pretty impressive. It's quite frankly one of the things I value the most, and I know there aren't too many of me's and who work in that clinical epi space. There's some, you all, and Amanda, and there are several others, but there aren't hundreds of us in Washington. But for me, this interface between clinical and biostats and epi is what I do, and it's sort of my natural home. And I tried never to miss these meetings. I really like them. I have a couple of thoughts about topics and people. First of all, the people, one of the things, as I said on the executive committee meeting, we've learned talking to all the EC members is that the last 3 years were really rough for recruitment. I mean, we heard that over and over. Not many new people were brought in, and those are the lifeblood of a CFAR and of activities like this. You want the new people to rally around and come to activities like this. So we're not educating each other, but we're helping to train the next generation. And we're going to be starting off, as somebody knows, this fall with the DC CFAR kickoff, institutional days where we go around with the developmental core and present the CFAR to hopefully as many people as possible. But I think thinking about how do we engage some of the investigators at all the DC cohort sites, across the city, and get them to come to a meeting like this. And one way to do it is to have them present, and ask them to present what's going on in their world. And again, this wouldn't necessarily be the junior people, but clinicians across the city who might anneal to the core. And it's the oldest trick in the book is if you want someone to participate, ask them to give a talk or ask them to just share their experiences about something. I think in terms of topics, there's a couple of things. So anyway, I think the core could give some thought about, I've been doing this now sadly a long time, and this is a different group than Mary Young, Gary Simon, Manya Magnus and Sam Simmons. It's Seble, it's Mark, it's Ching, it's hopefully we'll bring on an epidemiologist as well. It's a new generation and a new really, really committed, smart generation, and how to use that charisma and energy to bring in new people, I think, is my first topic. My second topic is topics. And I was able to think of a couple of categories as we were speaking. So, I know I'm talking a lot, but I'll shut up after this, I promise. What's new? This is an opportunity for us to hear what you all think is really hot in the field. And so if there are new clinical or prevention issues or methodologic issues that you all as leaders of this core think that we should know about, I think those topics bring in a lot of people. So, if there are things, what's the hot new clinical and prevention things at CROI, ask, either having a guest speaker or having someone summarize that. Because of Zoom, it can be, you can invite anyone from anywhere and they'll come to a CFAR talk. I think that's an opportunity where, boy, if Dr. So-and-so, who is the expert in so-and-so from UW, is giving a talk, I think you generate a lot of interest if you had this, in a sense, listserv, not just the people who we push it out to, but actively try to get lists of all the clinicians at all the DC cohort sites and say, this might be of interest to you. So the hot topics in your area. The second category is being what's new in DC. So if the WISE has an important presentation or poster at a conference, if the cohort has something that's important at a conference. I know Rupa Patel emailed us last week from Hopkins. They had, apparently at IAS, Whitman Walker presented the largest clinic sample size of experience of long-acting injectable prep and treatment of any poster in the world. I mean, that was impressive. I don't think, I may not have gotten that right, but boy, there's someone from DC presenting stuff in Australia, and we should have them presenting those things to us. They already have the poster. And so That's another idea. And then I think, methodologic issues. I think since Sebla, we have great respect for your leadership, and since you've decided to keep population science, then, what are the cutting edge methodologic issues that biostats and epi that we could add to the core as well? So those are my buckets, and I hope some of that's helpful.
Yeah. Oh no, that's great. That's great. I will, as people are joining, so just to reorient everybody, thank you for joining. So we're basically, this is an open forum that we usually hold in the summertime, just trying to make sure that get feedback on what we're doing, what we've done this past year, and then to get ideas of what things might be helpful to people. And I figured I didn't include this earlier. This is the lineup that we have so far for this upcoming period. And it does include some of these things, but I added here some of the things you just mentioned. So I just wanted to have that up there because it has really important things, I think. Including in September for Dr. Pan, who'll present on methodologies that are important in observational data, focusing on work that she's doing, but which has direct application to many other cohort studies that we are all involved with, really thinking about reprieve and the reprieve study, the findings, the implications, and we're really hoping to have a multi-pronged discussion on this, both from investigators. I believe both Whitman Walker and Georgetown were CRS sites for the reprieve study, but also to really think about maybe from the DC cohort perspective, what are going to be the measurable things that will be looked at within that cohort, which is a clinic-based cohort, to see how does the implementation flow. So these are really things we think are going to be really, really important. An ID week summary, which we did last year, again, highlighting what's new and what's presented at what for HIV is a smaller component of the big ID week meeting. It's our National Infectious Diseases Society meeting, but I think there's usually something that is presented there that is important to highlight. We haven't included things from the IAS meeting, but that's a really good idea and something we can tap into, especially if there are DC focused studies that are being presented on the international stage. And then we wanted to hear from some of our MAC, the Mid-Atlantic collaboration folks at Hopkins about antibody cure and including antibodies for treatment. So I think Dr. Barr is someone who we were hoping to invite, more methodologic approaches that Sam is willing to do. And then another methodology one, which was brought up to us, was just about how to recruit for research studies, which I think a lot of nuts and bolts that we can make recommendations on based on our experiences. And I know with my group, I think both we can really look at some of the differences between different approaches to recruit younger, older individuals, those social media approaches and others. So I think that would be good. And then MPOX, just updates from folks who've had funding from our pilots or supplements. So that's what we have on the docket. But we are, again, I've added, thank you, Alan, I've added a couple of things. But any other additional thoughts, comments from the group here?
Well, hey, this is Ching. I think these talks has to be initiated with people like carrying some research, right? The relevant research. But I wonder if prevention or like heterogeneity of HIV patient population, if that would be I see funding opportunities for prevention of HIV for high risk population, and then for people already have HIV, different complications, right? Like in the area of precision medicine. So all these are hot topics in other chronic disease, and there are, you know, mature statistical methods, but I don't know, like I don't know where to find these researchers to encourage them develop this direction or something. But I think those topics would be of interest from the funding purpose.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, you've hit on kind of, I mean, I think one of the, from a prevention and heterogeneity perspective, what immediately comes into mind is prevention for women, because it's not easy to necessarily pinpoint risk. There's a good amount of heterogeneity, and the risk may not be one's own behavioral risk. So that has been a big area of interest for many people. And I think one where the work still needs to happen. So hopefully that may be something, you know, I think when you're presenting your work, I'm very curious to see how you deal with that heterogeneity. For finding people and implementing PrEP, that's one issue. And then for the precision medicine in terms of understanding the comorbidity. So there's a lot of work that happens in our observational studies on comorbidities, and also within the DC cohort, right, which is a clinic-based cohort. So we see comorbidities emerging earlier in persons with HIV, and there's a lot of work happening trying to understand why, and where does this arise from. And so of course there's the virus, there's the drug, there's the drugs that people are on, and then there's like the host response to whatever combination, there's genetics. So there's a lot of work in that area. But I think highlighting it from, or coming at, I think the angle that you're talking about does have pretty unique potential opportunities for work. I know from our unit, Blair is working on trying to understand metabolic syndrome. And she has a KL2 that's funded to look at this. And we've been looking at some of our data, and it's very interesting because there's a lot of missing data. You know, you don't have, we have every 6-month visits, but we don't have, you know, valid 6-month worth of exposure to any of these potential exposures. And so, you know, the approaches that you use are really kind of interesting. Maybe I'll send her over to have a consultation with you, because I think there are very interesting ways that I think you could look at it. When you look at drug use as an exposure, is another one. How do you quantify drug use when you only measure exposure once in a 6-month interval, but then, you know, you can be on and off using drugs, on and off what kind of drugs and the quantity of drugs. So when you look at that longitudinal 20, 30 plus years of data, how do you quantify that exposure? It's all it's challenging.
Yes. And we do have similar issues in diabetes. Think about metformin, right? People start prevention using metformin, then they might stop because they lose weight or they have other adverse events, and then the on and off. So yes, and missing data, as you said, first the longitudinal trajectories. If you miss some, you on and off, how to summarize them, and then they're missing data. And the other direction in diabetes is we do meta-analysis. So because one cohort, you have how many? 3,000, 2,000, that's big. But every cohort is still special in terms of the enrollment criteria, everything. So now the trend is you do integrative consortiums, multiple cohorts, and then you compare the results across cohorts or pool them to get more persuasive. But all these are super interesting statistically, and wonder if there are potentials, you know, to use these methods in HIV research. I mean, HIV patients live very long now. It's a chronic disease, so there will be longitudinal issue and all this.
Yeah. So with our clinic-based cohorts, the DC cohort encompasses people who are engaged in care across the different the entire spectrum of health service delivery models here in DC. So that's also another pretty distinct angle. But Alan, I really like the idea of inviting different people who are part of the DC cohort to be present, to present, to kind of engage with us. I do wonder whether and to what extent providing CME might be a stimulus to some people coming who may not otherwise attend. That could then be just part of, I'm sure between all of the institutions that we represent that we can host CME, but I wonder if that would be, have you seen that done within a CFAR? And what do you think about that for engaging in providers who really are, number one, they are the bedrock for referrals for research participants, but also for, they're the ones eventually who are going to be implementers of, effective strategies that we identify using research. Is that an angle that you think may have legs?
I can't recall that we've done it, but I recall something early on where someone was doing it.
Okay.
Brandy can find out by communicating with the other associate directors about whether other CFARs have done it. I just don't know, but that's an important and relatively easy question to get an answer to.
Yeah.
So,
and so I think what that would entail is just having Mark, you may be more tuned into this. I've provided materials for CME to we do through MedStar, and I previously did run our CME program for one of our community hospitals out in California. But as long as we have, I think they just have certain requirements about disclosures around funding sources, clear objectives and measurable outcomes. And I think all of us already have platforms through which we are able to give CME.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how the university at CW structures it, but I think you're right. Those are kind of the basic criteria. Something measurable, like a post-test where you ask like 4 questions that can be very basic. You can sometimes ask the same 4 questions at the start and the end to kind of document increasing, knowledge from the presentation. And I think that it's fairly low-hanging fruit.
Does your unit provide CME?
No.
Okay.
Not that I have ever done. So I don't think so.
Okay.
I was just thinking, just a quick comment. When I said DC cohort sites, it wasn't because they were in the cohort. It's because it's just so many different sites. So, for example, it might be interesting to hear, having nothing to do with the cohort, La Clinica. What are the challenges they face serving largely Spanish-speaking population in DC, or Unity, that has such a different model with so many providing HIV care at many different clinics as opposed to one centralized place. It'd just be interesting. There's so many local questions that if one site were presenting, other sites might be really interested in that.
Yeah. Yep.
When I worked at the VA, it's such a great model for clinical care, and Melissa, and how the VA provides such an interesting model for care. So not all the time, but once a year or twice a year, that could be interesting to hear from some of our colleagues across the city about the challenges and the opportunities that they have.
And I think those may be quite distinct to coming out of COVID and swinging back into in person from telehealth. So I think, yeah, the models of HIV care successes and challenges might be a very nice session, and we may be able to invite, you know, multiple people so that it's not too heavy on any one group, from the maybe one academic and non-academic partners.
Mhm.
Okay.
Good idea.
Mhm. That's really nice. I think, you know, for
Providing care
us,
at DC Health now, right? Aren't they they have HIV prevention and treatment services at DC Health?
they do
Yeah.
the DC Health and
Well,
Wellness. Mhm.
I don't know what they're doing. I mean, it'd be nice to hear from that. I know Us Helping Us just started providing care. How's it going? How many patients they have? You know, we can't do all these things, but
At DC Health, the prevention program is run by one of our former fellows, Rachel Harrell. So that would be easy to get her involved.
it's just something if it's DC focused, either on the research science end or on the clinical provision end, or it would bring in other DC people. But so it's not just the topics will pull people out, but we also have to push it out to more clinicians. I think it's not occurred to me until you called this call that, you know, we probably could have an email list of all the HIV clinical providers in DC. We don't, and broadcast out these topics to them. It's rather than just the people who are signing up for CFARs. So this could become really the forum for exchange of clinical science in the city.
You know, because I think sometimes we've relied in the past, we've really relied on and in the very distant past, you know, it'll be drug reps or who are really, you know, yes, something gets presented at a national meeting, but then they're bringing it to different clinic groups and saying, hey, you know, this is our product and this is how you can use it. But we don't, I think we can probably step back from the product and really talk about the effectiveness, the efficacy, think about effectiveness, implementation strategies, you know, for example, around Reprieve or one of those things. That would be talking about Reprieve. I think having an engaged group of clinicians at that talk, all hearing the same information, is really, really helpful, because you know, just with like with Doxy Pep, you know, we heard about it, Doxy Pep at Croy, and we were like, why aren't we doing this? There's no good reason not to do it. And, you know, the guidance is emerging, but, you know, it takes to having heard about it and had some a formulation of how you can implement safely. And we're already doing it, and DC Health is doing it, right? Before there's actual formal guidance from CDC. There's mention of it, but it's not like it's not a mandated guidance as yet. So I think those things would be really good to make sure that our clinical partners also hear about these things, but we're measuring what our clinical partners are doing within the cohort. So it's kind of, I think, makes sense to maybe think about that. And I think we can probably make a justification for why it's helpful, even though this is research. Any other ideas or thoughts from anybody?
So Rachel and Tamara are on the phone. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
from them.
Hi everyone, this is Rachel. I was going to type in the chat, but I hope it's okay that I join this call. I'm actually not technically in DC or in the DC CFAR, but I was previously for several years, and I'm hoping to make my way back to DC after next year. So I hope it's okay that I'm here.
Oh yeah,
I just
sure.
like to stay informed and you know,
Yeah.
what's going on back in DC, and hopefully we'll be working with some of you in the future in some capacity.
Where are you, Rachel? Where are you based now?
I'm still in Lusaka, Zambia.
Ah, okay.
What are
Yeah,
you doing
I'm
there?
here
It's very
for.
late for you.
It is. I was just about to make my excuses and log off. It's almost midnight, but I'm here for 2 years as a Fogarty Research Fellow, doing HIV research and looking at causes of preterm birth in women living with HIV.
Oh, very nice.
When you come
And
back,
before
you can
that,
give a
I
talk.
was. I would love to if there's any interest. Before that, I was working with Alberto Bosque as a postdoc for several years. So that's how I met this got aligned with this group. But yeah, I don't have anything specific to add. I'm just happy to stay informed. So thanks for letting me be on the call.
So,
Joining.
Rachel, we'd love to host you on the Women's SIG and have you talk to us a little bit about some of your work if you're interested. If you can pop your email in the chat, Vivian and I can reach out to you, and we easily could make sure that, you know, we usually meet at a little bit early, so it's at 2 p.m. Eastern time. But that way we can get you to present and have people see your work, and yeah, it should help with the job search. But yes, definitely call us when you are starting to look.
Thank you so much. That'll be a huge help, and I'd be happy to present if there's interest. I'll add my email in the chat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it would be great.
Thank
We're
you. Thank you
scrounging
so much.
around for women to present, for people to present on women-related HIV. So this is great. And yes, you're welcome anytime. So, and if you have ideas, you can pop them in, you can write to us, or, and I'm sure you have a very unique vantage point from what you're seeing in that setting, but some of those things are also very relevant to us here. There may be innovations that are, you know, being implemented there that maybe would be helpful for us to think about hearing too on this call. So if you, you know, please let us know. Feel free to send an email or suggestions.
Will do. Thank you.
Tamara, how are you?
Hello, everyone. Yes, it's good to see you all. I'm sorry, I'm off camera. There's some construction work going on in my apartment and
no worries.
all these things. But I was also just thinking about when you were discussing around recruitment and some of presentations around like effective and community engaged recruitment. And something else that I've been sort of thinking about or in the back of my mind is also around stronger coordination across different projects that are using some of the same strategies or effectively looking to tap into the same populations, whether that's kind of locally or even at a national level. I think, you know, I often think, okay, I'm going to hit up Grindr and Perry Street and, you know, these clinical spaces. And, you know, we have our list that we go through. And I've just been thinking more and more about ways in which we can better leverage each other's recruitment activities, even if it's, you know, for those of us that retain sort of, you know, someone isn't eligible for this project, but they're looking to be contacted about other projects. Like, how can we create better synergies around that so that we aren't all just sending the same chunks of money to the same, you know, sometimes problematic, my own thinking organizations, or, you know, really burdening the same kind of clinical and community organizations with requests that are really quite overlapping. So that's something that's just been sort of milling about in my mind, especially as I have a couple of projects dealing with recruiting very much overlapping populations.
No, that's having just come back from a recruiting meeting for our MaxWise and STAR cohorts that lasted, I think, almost 3 hours. Yeah, it really is very difficult, but you're right, there are a lot of synergies. There's a lot of information that's known that can be shared as well.
Another crazy idea. You know, we often talk about cores doing user surveys, and some, as you know, we're trying to do a survey for the whole CFAR, and it's very frustrating in the middle of the summer. We're up to about 70 responses, so if you keep at it, you actually get great information. But I wonder if we expanded the pie of potential users here to being, you know, a more broader clinical audience in DC, and we could get a lot of email addresses, which I think we could, and then ask them, what are the topics that, you know, here are examples of specific topics and general topics that would be of interest. What, you know, what would get you to come to a meeting, and just ask them, you know, what would you like to hear? How would this be of value to you in your practice? And again, we're doing science, not clinical providers. So it would have to be something, clinicians who are interested in science. So, but there may be some way to bring people in through a survey, because I mean, clearly basic science, we do that all the time. We send, I mean, Vivian knows, she does them. We send out surveys to all the labs and say, what do you need? What, here's the services we offer. But I think you could ask for topics for these meetings from that as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. We haven't sent any surveys. I don't know how is it okay to plan to do a survey for this core? We haven't done one, but I've kind of have had the sense that maybe we don't want too many surveys to go out, but we haven't done one for a while. So I think it would be really great if we can move forward with thinking about putting something together. Very brief.
A very brief 5 questions, and but to a lot of people, and who
Yeah.
are those people? And there aren't that many HIV epidemiologists, HIV biostatisticians, but there are a lot of HIV clinicians in the
Yeah.
city, and it might be interesting to hear.
Yeah.
The other people to tap into are, of course, the NIH, and the HIV Cure Swig has actually been pretty good at that. I mean, there are clinicians at NIH, Henry Mazur's group, and Cliff Lane. There's plenty of people doing research in HIV at NIH, and having them as speakers or as members could be another way to.
Yeah, definitely.
It raises the bar when we're local with NIH, and so having someone from the clinical center present could be really cool. Yeah.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I don't think we've invited somebody from there to speak, but I do think that's a really good idea. And there's a lot of cross-pollination between NIH and the different academic settings for sure. So I think that's one. I'll add that onto our list here.
So I hope it's okay. You asked for a brainstorming session, so I'm just throwing out all my ideas.
Totally. Yes.
You can throw away the ones that are terrible and cherry pick any that are good. A lot of it is mission, right? It's what you want the core to be, and as opposed to what you want these meetings to be. But to me, these meetings could be a real crossroads of discussing cutting edge clinical and prevention HIV research issues in the district. I mean, it seems to me it's a natural forum, and without a lot of effort, we probably could increase the number of people a lot who would value this. And you're right, CMA might be a great hook.
Yeah, I mainly because most everybody who needs to everyone who needs to maintain their license needs the CME. So it's an easy, if it's an easy enough. I mean, operationally, I think we'll have to think about who would be the granting institution for the CME. But it's something that can be done if as long as and we'll see. I think our external advisors are always, our scientific advisory group is always very they do give good feedback. So we'll see how this resonates, if this is something that we're able to do 1 or 2 times. I think especially around reprieve, and then see if we have the right tone when we talk about it in terms of either incorporating it, embedding it in our future ongoing and future plans, or whether it's better to drop it. I think it'd be good to hear back on that pretty quickly. Anything else from, and Tamara, how's your study? How's your recruitment going?
So for the Light project with Jonathan Radina, that is, it's been challenging, but we are trying some newer or slightly different methods and working more with our community partners to facilitate that. For the R01, those, recall, are just us refinding the folks who had participated when they were high school or in middle school, and just kind of finding them now some 15 years later. So that's actually been great. Who knew? Refinding people is a lot easier than finding folks for the first time. And so for that cohort, I think we've identified within about a 90% confidence, about 70% of the original 8,200 people who participated. So that's good. So those, things are going well-ish, but just, especially with light, it's very challenging. There was a late meeting a couple of months ago across the different projects, and it was astounding. There was only one project that had successfully assembled their cohort, and they had spent upwards of $300,000 in recruitment alone, with a lot of that going to, as I mentioned, Grindr and Perry Street and some of those, which I just find just exorbitant and unsettling. To think that, a company is making millions of dollars off of us, essentially recruiting the same 1,000 people. But don't get me started. But otherwise, we're just throwing all of the darts, so to say, and seeing what sticks, and shifting to some more of our community-based recruitment activities, and kind of moving away from the apps for a little bit.
It is very interesting. And in the end, how much technology and that digital space, how effective we are, I think our metrics are very different than like the marketing metrics, where a click is enough. But for us, a click is not enough.
Exactly.
We're actually planning to put in a concept sheet and write exactly about this for our Max and Ys and Star recruitment, because we have really interest, and this age spectrum is also very interesting. And the focus on women, which is again quite distinct. So, but yeah, no, I think I do, maybe for our planned discussions on recruiting for research studies, I think it'll be good to maybe really have that be a multi-group collaboration on, and eventually, maybe we will have a few papers to submit on kind of the how-to of research, which Manya, Mark, Sam, and I talked about last year. The how do you actually do research, which I think, is really important, and not something where there's much that's talked about. I think we talked about this. I don't see it on our list, but it was there last year, where we talked about your study team. What do you do once you find out that you have funding, building your study team, and just like all of the little check boxes that have to go into actually doing research well. And recruitment is a big part of that.
I really love that. Actually, you just made me think of it. Manya has encouraged Khadijah and I from our Faith and Arts study, the ACP, to write something around recruitment and really doing community engaged recruitment to reach, in this case, it was Black women living with HIV. But just to kind of talk about not only our experiences, but some of the strategies that we found that work really well, and some of the strategies that we think work well and learn are supposed to be the way to go, and actually do not work as well with the population. And so I just don't think there's enough of those kind of how-tos there. And then it's just kind of trial by fire. But when you have such a limited time, that can be a really challenging place. So I like that.
Yeah. I do always think about, like, as I thought about some of these, the how-tos, and this one also might be a strategy question, Alan, is these are things that we think are really valuable, but they're incredibly difficult to publish. Because it's not cutting edge science. It's new knowledge in some ways, but about the how-to, as opposed to here are the results. And the best place or way to actually probably do this is through a purchased supplement, but it costs money. So I've thought in my head about asking my CCS colleagues if people would be interested in contributing to that effort, but I guess I may come to you with the same question. You know, if Tamara has a paper on this, you know, Manya and Sam and I, Mark, we clearly had at least one paper that could be on the how-tos of like that early part of, I just got funded, now what do I do? The methodologic approaches may be something that can be nicely summarized. And then in Max and Wise, we actually went from, we were able to remove ourselves from the single IRB requirement. And it was all around research ethics and IRBs, which someone needs to write, but you know, nobody's like really invested in writing it until we know it's going to have a home. But finding a home for these kinds of papers would be really nice, and I think could be a really good and important contribution.
Well, as you know, we have great current expertise putting together supplements. I've been working on nonstop for 3-4 months already, night and day on the CDIPI supplement, and I was the senior editor for 3 Jade's Egypt supplements. So Brandy and I know how to get a contract with
Okay.
Jade's, and we know about the process. It's expensive. But I think not unreachable. You know, we have, as you know, if we ever get our notice of award from NIH, we have an excess and they want us to spend it. So this would be a good time. In short, the way it works is you've got to convince Jade's or another journal that this supplement is of interest to their readership. And so it's not a competitive process, but it's an evaluative process where you have to put together every article and who the authors are going to be with a synopsis and basically submit that to their editors and say, is this interesting enough that you would support it? If they do, then you can negotiate a price, and then you have to get everybody to write the articles. And now if you did it all in DC, we're working among friends, so I think it's very doable. But the bigger it is, the harder. I mean, we have 19 articles, and it's beyond herding cats. It's herding an army, and we've done it.
Is it that many articles in a supplement, or is there
In
a
each ship we had 8 to 12 each, 3 times. This is pan CFAR, so there are 19 articles.
Okay.
It strikes me as too big, but that's the project. So it's a nationwide project. But this, I would say 6 to 8.
Okay.
Would be more
6 to
manageable
8 as a minimum. Okay. Well, it's good to
we can
know
afford that.
about process as well, and I think the DEI components, the early stage investigator focus, all of those things I think would be really good to highlight. Again, very difficult to publish on these, but
the other approach we've taken, Sibylle, is what the Social and Behavioral Sciences Core has done, which is publish it ourselves, which is not as interesting to scientific writers, but we actually put it on our website. So if I'm sure you got CC'd on the best practices guide for partnering communities, and it was basically decided by the community members who wrote that and the scientists who participated, that it would take about a year and a half to get this thing published. And they didn't want to wait that long, so we published it on our DC CFAR website. And
so a white paper or a gray paper, I don't even know how they call those, but that does sound very enticing as well.
So the core could produce it would be shorter. It's a less of a lift and it's less formal, but you could create a white paper, a gray paper,
very visible. Yeah.
And then we could market it on the weekly update, and people you'd be surprised. All the other CFARs, we're getting clicks about how we have established these different relationships with the community. I mean, people probably see it more than they see our peer-reviewed publication.
And measurable clicks are a good thing, right? It's like the wave of the future. So as long as we have some metric that we can measure, that would be really good. And I think, so I don't know how that would be viewed with regards to promotion. For someone who's putting together a packet.
Not as favorable.
Yeah, so that's the only downside for someone who needs that for promotion, but certainly for quick dissemination, I think it's
for example, you could ask a lot of people to write 1 page and have a 10-page, document that
Yeah.
pulls together some of the wisdom of the providers and scientists in DC. But I think if you wanted to do something and get scientists involved,
Right.
like CDIPI, they're going to want a formal published.
They're going to want a formal, yeah, I think that's the thing is we want there to be opportunities, for people, we want people to be able to highlight this as a contribution in their promotion applications and so on. So, okay, but good to know the details. I think that's very helpful. And Tamara, if we do get a supplement together, then we'll definitely make sure that to hit you up for at least 1 article, maybe 2. And maybe you can be senior on one and the first author on the other. So that would be very good. All right. Anything else? I think we're getting close to the end of the hour.
I think we get it's like the person who traveled the farthest for a wedding. I think you just had the person who traveled the furthest for a core meeting from Zambia. Some sort of prizes.
Yeah.
We've had people from Africa call in for the HIV women and the cure combined talk that you put together, but for a core meeting, someone calling in from Zambia, that's got to be some kind of record.
I think we have to find her a job, one of our shops. A committed person, known entity. That's really good. We'll have to let Alberto know that she was on the call. Okay. I think I've taken notes on all of these. Vivian, I'm going to share this back with you so that you can keep it for us.
Sounds good.
All right, but thank you everybody for joining today and for all the discussion. I think we're off for next month, so we'll reconvene in the fall in September. So I hope everybody has a good rest of your summer.
Thank you for providing this opportunity for us to share our ideas.
Okay.